jumping right back into Exodus. Last week we talked about the importance of Passover. How, of course, Passover was the story of how God passed judgment over the Hebrews, but it was delivered as righteous judgment to the Egyptian nation for the disobedience of keeping the Hebrews in slavery for countless years. We studied how God gave the Hebrews a lot of detailed information of how Passover, after this initial one, was to be celebrated, and we discussed some of those, and we discussed how the importance of the Passover celebration became a very important symbol to Christians, as it was the precursor of the Lord's Supper, communion, or Last Supper, whatever you want to call it, and how Christ is our Passover lamb, saving us from the wrath we deserve. Today, we will start the actual talking about the event that the book of Exodus is named for, which is the Exodus from Egypt. We're going to kind of jump around a little bit because, again, when you start getting into this point of Scripture, you get story, then a little bit more detail about this law, and then story, and then a little bit of detail of this law, and then story. So I'm trying to condense this together. So we are going to start in chapter 12, starting in verse 35, and I'm going to read 35 to 41. So that's Exodus chapter 12, starting in verse 35. Now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, and they asked the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. Then the children of Israel journeyed to Ramses and Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. A mixed multitude went up with them also, the flocks and herds and great deals of livestock. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they had brought out of Egypt. For it was not leavened, because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared provisions for themselves. Now the sojourn or journey of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years, and it came to pass at the end of 430 years, on the very same day it came to pass, all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. That was a mouthful. While the Egyptians woke up from that first Passover, dealing with the consequences of their sins and the death of the firstborn in the land, the nation of Israel were getting a move on. They were not waiting for Pharaoh's command to tell them to leave. Moses didn't go back to check on his former stepbrother, like in the Prince of Egypt movie, when you see Moses go to Ramses in that one, not Tutmos III, but Ramses, and says, "Can we go?" And he's like, "Get out of here." As we discussed in chapter 10 of verse 29, Moses tells Pharaoh, when he leaves that palace, he says, "This is the last time you're going to see me ever again." That day that they left, they plundered Egypt. God told Moses that this would happen several times, and that not only would the children of Israel walk out of Egypt, but they would walk out like conquerors. And notice that God calls them the armies of Israel. He does not call them the people. He calls them His army at this point. They left with jewels, livestock, unleavened bread, and as the words from verse 39 says, they were driven out. And if we read verse 33, it says that the Egyptians urged the people that they may leave the land in haste. In earlier chapters, when the plagues were going on, the 10 plagues were coming to an end, the people around Pharaoh started urging him, "Hey, maybe we should listen to their God Yahweh and let them go." But Pharaoh would not, because of the economical crisis that would further cause Egypt. It would seem that while Pharaoh was busy with dealing with the death of his son, the citizens of Egypt finally had enough with these plagues, with the 10th one coming, and begged the Hebrews to leave. So they took it upon themselves to get them out. And with that, after 430 years of being in Egypt, total, the Hebrews started to walk out. And in verse 37, we also get a very important detail that 600,000 men started the journey with Moses. But it wasn't just men who left. It was women and children too. So if you have 600,000 men who are above the age, they're not called boys in this, they're called men, and each of those men have a wife and at least one kid, then we get 600,000 men, 600,000 women, and 600,000 children, meaning that almost a population of nearly 2 million Hebrews left Egypt. That's a lot of people. Which is very important because God promised Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. You have to remember, 430 years prior to this, at the end of Exodus, 70 Hebrews walked into Egypt. 2 million are walking out. Now, as we continue the story, we're going to skip over to chapter 13, starting in verse 17.
17?
Yep. Ms. Fonetta, will you read 17 and 18?
Then it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt.
So finally, on their way back from Goshen, for the first time after 430 years, they're heading back to the Promised Land. What we see next is the Lord's command to Moses to start leading the children another way, away from the land of the Philistines, the way of the Philistines. So what that looks like is, this is future Israel right here. So this is what would be Canaan. All right, this is Arabia. This is the wilderness. This is Mount Sinai down here. Here's Egypt, the Nile River. Excuse my crude drawing. The Mediterranean Sea. And then the two gulfs that the Red Sea go into and split off into some rivers and lakes and stuff like that. The way of the Philistines is up here in the northern section, right? That would have been a straight shot into Israel, or what would be Israel. However, they have to go away from this. So they are led toward another route, toward the Red Sea, which again we're going to get to in a few minutes. But the reason the Lord didn't want them going that way, most scholars take the educated guess here that God did not want the newly freed Israelites facing a war right out of the gates. Let's go into verse 9. Sam, will you read 19 through 22?
Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the Israelites swear an oath. He had said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up with you from this place. After leaving Succoth, they camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. By day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people.
All right. So we get from these scriptures, Moses on his way also took the bones of Joseph with him. This was the patriarch we studied at the end of Genesis, and is the one who initially helped set up the Hebrews in Egypt, not for their, downfall, but for their benefit, because of the famine that was going on at the time. But they take his bones with him so he could finally be laid to rest in the Promised Land with the rest of his ancestors. The next few verses help us to plot a trail of the Israelites. So from Goshen to where they are heading, it looks a lot like this. Back in chapter 12, when we first started heading out, they are heading out of Goshen through Ramses, which is in the land of Goshen, and where, again, the Hebrews have been for the past 430 years. And FYI, again, the year is 1445 BC. From Ramses, they go to Succoth. And again, these are crudely where they might have been. There's some debate among this, but this is the one that I found that most people agree on. So from Ramses to Succoth, which is going southeast. After they left Succoth, they went a little more north to Ephraim, at the edge of the wilderness, where they traveled with their guide, which was God, day and night, a pillar of cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night. God was leading his people where he wanted them to go, and this leads us to chapter 14. Emma, will you read Exodus chapter 14, verses 1 and 2?
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they turn and encamp before Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, over against Baal-zephon, before it shall ye encamp by the sea.
So, from Ephraim, they continue their journey toward the wilderness, toward the Red Sea, camping near Migdol. Now, before we get into the Red Sea story, we have to ask, how long did this initial trip take? Well, if the Passover was at midnight, and they were commanded not to leave their houses until morning, as we studied, they left the next day, and most sources agree that it took them 3 days to get from Goshen to around Migdol, at the edge of where they would have crossed the Red Sea. And this is also found along with the campsite that are listed in Numbers chapter 33. However, we have an issue, and we're going to read that issue right now. Follow me along in Exodus chapter 14, starting in verse 3. Now, Pharaoh, here he comes again, will say of the children of Israel, they are bewildered by the land. The wilderness has closed them in. Then I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them, and I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. Now it was told the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people. And they said, Why have we done this? Why have we let Israel go from serving us? So he made ready his chariots and took his people with him. Also he took 600 choice chariots and all the chariots of Egypt with captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and he pursued the children of Israel, and the children of Israel went out with boldness. So the Egyptians pursued them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army, and overtook them camping by the sea beside, and I'm going to butcher this word, Pi-hahiroth, before Baal-zephon. That was as close as I could get it. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, Pharaoh, back in Egypt, his heart hardened one final time, as we read from Scripture. With his heart hardened, he loses the sensitivity that he's just lost his firstborn son. He loses sensitivity that everyone in Egypt has just lost their firstborn child. And with that, he's asking, why have we released the Israelites from slavery? He's more saddened by the loss of his economy success with the Hebrews than he was his own people or his son's death. So he ordered 600 specialized chariot riders who were a trained military unit to go after the Hebrews and bring them back to Egypt. Miss Bonetta, will you read 10 and 11?
And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were very afraid, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us to bring us up out of Egypt?
Will you also read 12?
Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness.
You said that very sarcastically. I love you. The final encampment before crossing the Red Sea was Pi-hahiroth. Pharaoh's army could be spotted from a distance, and here we get our first bit of complaining toward Moses from the Hebrews that he was leading. Why, O Moses, why did you bring us here? Were there not enough graves to bury us in Egypt, so you brought us out here to die in the desert? Moses, go away so we may beg Pharaoh to take us back so we can serve the Egyptians. How quickly the Israelites forgot what God had done for them just 3 hours ago. It's been 3 hours. No reason why they needed constant reminders. Let's continue on, starting in verse 13. Sam, will you read 13 through 15?
Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on.
Emma, will you read 16 through 18?
But lift thou up thy rod, and stretch out thine hand over the sea, and divide it, and the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. And I will get me honor upon Pharaoh, and upon all his host, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen.
And in verse 19, and the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them. And the pillar of clouds went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to the one, and it gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near the other all that night. Moses gives an immediate commentary back to the children of Israel complaints, telling them, don't be afraid. Salvation is coming. God will fight for us. During this situation, it appears from verse 15 that Moses goes to the Lord in prayer, asking God for help, because God responds to him saying, why are you crying to me? God is not being mean in this, but he's simply wondering, where's your faith gone? Again, it's been 3 hours since you left Egypt. What? Well, not 3 hours. Did I say 3 hours or 3 days? 3 days. It's been 3 days. Where's your faith gone? Again, kind of like with the disciples. Again, the 10 plagues weren't just for Egypt for judgment, but they were to also show the Hebrews that after 430 years, God had never left them. And I love verse 15 because God simply replies to Moses, tell the children of Israel to keep walking.
Yeah.
Move it. Get stepping. God then gives Moses instruction on what he's to do next, which we'll get to in a second, because I don't want to repeat myself. The next thing that God does gets missed a lot in the children's version of the story. God, in the form of a pillar of smoke, became the rear guard for the Hebrews, blocking a visual path for the Egyptians, while at the same time leading the Hebrews with light toward the Red Sea. Literally blinding the Egyptians. It's kind of cool. Let's continue on in verse 21 through 23. Miss Bonnet, if you'll read that for us.
Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided, so that the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them in the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen.
So Moses then listened to God's instructions that he gave him, and those instructions were to stretch out the staff he had and his hand over the sea, and God used a strong east wind to start causing the waters to part and dry land to appear so they could walk across the sea. Now, before we continue this, we have a few things to discuss with this story. The word used for Red Sea, I'm going to write up here, Yam. I'm going to butcher this. Yam Sup? Maybe? Yam Sup? It's spelled Yamsuph. Or Reed Sea. The term can be applied to several bodies of water, including both of the gulfs that the Red Sea goes into, the Red Sea itself, and all of the bodies of water that go through that area, because there are several. Some theories put the crossing around certain lakes in the northern area. However, those are, they are considered too far north and in the way of where the Philistines are, so that's why I got X's on. Some say that it was the spit of land, or right here, where the water of the Gulf of, Emma, help me out with this one. You said this one great earlier. The Gulf of Suez? Suez. Yeah. That they crossed there. So, some take out that one because it would have been too far south and would have cut less time off their journey than what they had. So that one's not necessarily also. One, though, that is this area right here, which is called the Bitter Lake region, which was a marshy body of water that also, again, this word Yam Sup is used for, which describes, again, all these bodies of water, but it may have been this one right here. Now, either way, the importance of the story is that God provided yet another way for the Hebrews to escape captivity. And this path here that I've kind of drawn with dotted lines is where they kind of went. Now, they could have went here too, but either way, they had to cross a rather large body of water in order to escape, because going around would have taken way too much time and would have gotten them caught from the Egyptians, because eventually the Egyptians would have caught up with them, because you got people walking versus people in chariots and horses. But God was providing for them, again, another route to escape their captivity, and again providing them with salvation. And we also see from this, the Pharaoh and his people that are pursuing them, their hearts are hardened because they got blinders on. It's tunnel vision, like during a fight, because they want to go get them captured, and the consequences be darned, because they're going after them. Let's continue on in verse 24. Sam, will you read 24 through 26?
During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen."
Emma, will you read 27 and 28?
And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them.
And follow me along, verse 29 to the rest of the chapter. But the children of Israel had walked on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall to them on their right and on their left. So the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Thus Israel saw a great work which the people had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. It took all night for the children of Israel to cross. Again, 2 million people were a lot. God kept the Egyptians back long enough to allow them to cross. However, the Egyptians did get to the body of water, witnessing how God had allowed the waters to part so that dry land was there. Once the Hebrews were safe on the other side of the sea, God instructed Moses to raise his staff and hand again over the sea, this time causing the waters to fall back into their original position. The water collapsed, killing, according to verse 28, all the Egyptian army that had come with Pharaoh. Now, there is not enough evidence in this story to suggest that Pharaoh himself was killed in the story. However, Psalms 136:15 says, but overthrew Pharaoh and his army in the Red Sea. So that might answer our question about the fate of Pharaoh Thutmose III. And there are a few historical artifacts that give suggestion of this, such as they have Pharaoh Thutmose III's body. It is in museums, and it was badly damaged by something. They don't know what he died of, quote unquote, but his body, apart from all other types of pharaohs, his body is badly damaged. It is not as great of a mummification process, and maybe it wouldn't have been if they pulled him out of water days later.
Also, chapter 15 talks about them when they sing the song.
Yeah.
They sing
I ain't got there yet. You tell me.
It sings about the Pharaoh and his chariots going into the sea.
All right, gotcha. I ain't got there yet. There are a few other historical facts that have been uncovered, such as Egyptian art that shows a man in a chariot passing through 2 swirls of water. Also, there is historical knowledge. Thutmose III was a military pharaoh. During his time, he had 17 successful military campaigns during his reign as pharaoh. However, his son, his second son, again, it was not directed from father to firstborn, because the firstborn died under mysterious circumstances, but Amenhotep II, when he took over, only had 3 successful military campaigns. And his third one, he tries to take over a place and succeeds because, according to history, he needed horses because of Egyptians' lack thereof, livestock because of their lack thereof, and chariots. During this raid, his people were able to successfully get 1,092 chariots and 1,000 slaves because, according to the history, Egypt was severely lacking during this king's reign. Which is why still I think that Amenhotep's big brother was the one that was killed during the 10th plague. He was attempting to build back what his father had lost because of his blinders of trying to go after the
Because he couldn't
Hebrews.
control his rage.
And he couldn't. The 19th dynasty, 2 pharaohs after Amenhotep II. So you got Tutmos III, which was the pharaoh of Egypt, I believe. And then you had his son Amenhotep II, which was the second born. But in the 19th dynasty, which comes 2 pharaohs after, around the year 1390 BC, Amenhotep III also refers to the land of Shesu, meaning wanderers, referring to a group of wandering people, and he says that their God was a God named Yahweh. So we have a lot of historical evidence that this took place. Any questions about any of that?